methods. Okay, that's fine. And just to say a little bit about me, you can see me on the screen, but there's another picture of me. My name's Sian Etherington. You can see on the map of the UK, that red, that's where I am at the minute, which is Stockport. It's a town sort of just south of Manchester, sort of between Manchester and Liverpool and Sheffield, if anybody knows any of those places. But that's where I am at the minute, and it's like rubbish British weather, basically, as you'd expect. Grey and dull and not very exciting. Anyway, that's where I am. I work at the University of Salford, which is just north of Manchester, and I'm now an academic developer, which means I work with staff, helping them develop their teaching. Previously, I ran an MA TESOL at Salford, and I have been part of the ReSIG IATEFL group, the research SIG, for quite some time. Worked with Harry and various other people in that group. I'm currently chair of a group called NARTESOL, that's the Northern Associations of Teachers of English Second Language, and we started off as a Northwest UK group. With the pandemic, we moved to be global, and we run regular teacher development webinars and an online conference. We've got an online conference coming up in May. So if you're interested in any of that, then please have a look at our website and see if you'd like to join. It's free to join, and it's quite very good. Free CPD for language teachers. That's a bit about me. What are we going to do today then? So I hope this is going to fit what you need, but hopefully by the end of the day, then we'll have done a bit of looking at data analysis approaches for quantitative and qualitative data, looking at the differences between those things, think a bit about how to analyse and present key aspects of quantitative data, and then begin to look at a bit of coding of qualitative data and thinking about themes in that, and maybe come on to thinking about ways that you might display data analysis and be sort of more creative ways that you might work with some of that data. So today is very much about the data you've got, what you might start to do with that, and how you might start to analyse that and start to make sense of it. So I hope that's okay. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. If you can write in the chat just to tell me where you're up to with data collection so far. So have you started data collection? And what have you done so far? What data have you collected? If you could write an answer to that question in the chat, that would be great. So it might be that you've done some interviews. It might be that okay. So Epol says, yes, I've collected some data. So what have you collected? I think we've got not very many people. I don't know if you're able to put your mic on and tell us what you've collected, Epol, or write it in the chat. Okay, that's great. Pictures, interview from colleagues, feedback from students. That's amazing. And Nicole from Cameroon, have you collected some data as well? Emil, okay, Emil says you've got one data collection, but 200 students. Question answer 200 students. That's really great. Really great. All right, that took a while to do. Nicole, have you collected data already? Had a discussion with students. That's nice. Yeah, really nice. Anyone else got some data they'd like to tell us about? Maybe not. So, okay. That's a good start. That's good to know. That's good to know you've got, yeah. Oh, okay. And Nicole collected and recorded answers in the discussion. Yeah. So you've got recordings of students talking to you. That's great. And somebody else, oh, Sueni. Ah, okay, that's from Amira. Collected questionnaires from students and teachers. So there's a quite a nice different types of data there already, aren't there? So there's questionnaires, discussion, pictures, interviews, student feedback. Really nice. And another one, interview with teachers and a questionnaire. Really, really nice. You've been working hard by the sound of it, and yeah, moved on a long way. That's really good. Okay. Oh well, that's kind of preempted my next slide, really. This is the slide I had about types of data. Let's see if we can have a look and see if it matches what you've told me in the chat then. So I had different types of data. You might, I don't know if you've seen this before, this sort of way of looking at data. You might have seen it in previous webinars. But going back to, thinking about, you might have data that is about your own exploring perceptions about an idea. So something as you're starting off doing a piece of research. So that might be your own reflections or notes on an idea, on a topic, looking at other people's ideas on a topic, or having a sort of informal conversations with colleagues. Moving on to the middle part, then you might move on a bit in terms of exploring other people's perceptions through things like reflective writing by students, having notes or recordings of discussions. So we've got that example from one of the participants here today. Having notes or recordings of interviews with individual people. And again, we've got examples of that, and responses to a questionnaire. And we've got some very nice examples of questionnaire responses as well. And then the third grouping is some things that you might use to explore behaviour. So what happens around a topic. So lesson plans and materials, lesson recordings, somebody doing critical notes, a critical friend coming in and observing a class and the notes from that, pictures, what happens in a class, and student work, student performance on tasks. So we've got those different kind of categories of data that you might collect for different reasons. So that might be the first lot for what you're thinking about something as you start off. Then I would call the next two categories kind of more of the data that will start to answer your research questions, start to answer your questions about your topic. So there are those ways of looking at data types. That's okay, right. I'm not sure whether you'll be familiar with the questions of the terms quantitative or qualitative data. So they are terms that you might have read or heard, or people have talked to you about, which are used to describe and categorize data types. So in the grid on the screen, there are different kinds of data, and again, some of those things on the screen there are data types that you've talked about. I want you to have a little think about which ones we might categorize as quantitative and which ones we might categorize as qualitative. So have a think about, have a read through them. Well, I'll read through them, and I'd ask you to write in the chat whether you think that is a quantitative thing or a qualitative thing. So if we write in the chat, if you think it's qualitative, write, I'll write it on it. So we're going to write this, I'm going to write it in the chat. If you think it's quantitative, write quant, like that. And if you think it's qualitative, write qualt, like that. So let's go through them. So 1, if you think that's your own written reflections, so written reflections, do you think quant or qualt? If you can write that in the chat for me. So we've got a qualt from Paul. That's nice. Yeah, and qualt, yes. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I would agree. I think, yes, that's much more likely to be a qualitative thing. Yeah. Okay. What about number two? Should we go through them? Yeah, number two, other people's ideas on the topic. Would that be quant or qualt? You can write it again in the chat. Yeah, that's nice, Nicole. Qualt, yeah. Yeah, okay, that's nice. I'm going to move to a different one now. What about number 7? So number 7 is responses to a questionnaire. Quant, yeah, okay. So we've got quant from Emil. That's nice. And what do we think about number 12? Students' performance on tasks. What is that likely to be? So number 12. So how well students do on a test, for example. Yeah, so we've got quant coming there. Yeah. Okay. So we can make that broad distinction, I think, can't we? Between things which are likely to have numbers in them, like questionnaire responses or performance on a task, how well people do in a test, as quantitative data, because you're looking at the that word quantity is there, isn't there, in that word. So quantitative data is stuff that you can that is usually numbers, or you can make into numbers. And qualitative is the stuff that's very hard. It's very hard to turn into numbers. That is more longer pieces of writing or reflection or words usually. So I'll show you what my thinking was about those different types of data. You can see from the ones we've got there on the screen, there were many more that I think were really qualitative. So written reflections, number 1, number 2, other people's ideas on the topic, qualitative, informal conversations and notes about those, qualitative, reflective writing by students, qualitative, notes of recordings of focus groups, discussions where you've got interviews or focus groups, so 5 and 6, qualitative. Response to a questionnaire, if you use a questionnaire, then you're looking to be able to turn that into numbers in some way, so that's quantitative. Lesson plans, number 8, I think could be either. I think depends on what you do with it. So you could turn lesson plans into numbers. You could look at how many times something is used in that, and that would be a quantitative way of dealing with it. But you could also look for things like themes, ideas, topics, and that would be a more qualitative way of looking at it. Lesson recordings, again, you might look at how long something happens for. How long does the teacher talk for? How long do the students talk for? And that would be a quantitative way of dealing with that. But again, you might look at it more qualitatively. So you might look at that more to get the feeling of what's happening in a lesson. Looking at notes about a session, a critical friend's notes about a session is more likely to be qualitative. Number 10, that was. Number 11, pictures of your class, and somebody earlier said they had pictures as data. I think maybe you're more likely to be qualitative again. And then, as we said, students' performance on tasks, probably likely to be quantitative. So you can see a little bit of the split there, and sometimes it's not absolutely definite that it's completely quantitative or qualitative. So in a way, it depends on what we're going to be doing with that data and what kind of questions we want it to answer, really. But very generally, as a very general rule, we can have this way of dividing things up. Quantitative is things to do with numbers, so we're looking at numbers. Qualitative to do with text, words, spoken or written words, and images. And we're likely to deal with those different types of data in a different kind of way. Is that okay? I'm hoping that's okay for you. Has anybody got any questions at that point? If you again, you can write them in the chat, or if you want to put a microphone on and just ask a question, that's fine.
I'll be looking at the chat in case there's a question.
Okay, yeah, I can see it, but yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
okay.
but yeah, that's handy if there is anything that comes up when I'm talking. Okay, that's great. Okay, I'll move on a bit. So that was thinking about different types of data. Thinking about then how we might start to analyze the different kinds of data that we've got. And analyzing the data, I think we can kind of think about two phases to that. One is, the first one, organizing the data, and the second one, kind of interpreting the data. So organizing the data essentially means thinking about cleaning it up, putting it in order, putting it into groups, categories, starting to maybe look at patterns a bit. So that kind of data starts off as very, very messy, usually. Starts off with a big, particularly if you've got things like interviews or focus groups or things from students, it can feel very, very messy. And part of that analysing of the data is starting to organise it a bit and kind of just get it under control a bit. And as we're doing that, there is that interpretation starts to happen. So I think the webinar following me, Kenan Dilektaş is going to talk more about data interpretation. So I'm not going to say so much about that, but I think it is important to realise that as you're analysing, the interpretation starts. I don't see them as two completely distinct activities. That there's the organisation, and then as you're doing that, and the analysis, the interpretation starts to come. But that is the second phase, is really starting to decide what it means. So it's answering those questions about, why is that? What does, what's important about it, and what am I going to do next about it? So that those questions would come in that second part on the interpretation. So I think thinking about that, it's useful, I think, to think about this framework for analysis that Anne Burns has published in 2010. It's quite a useful way of framing analysis of data. So she has this 5-stage process that goes through assembling the data, so getting that all together, and that's where you're up to. Many people now, you've got your data, you've collected your data, starting to code the data, comparing data, so looking across different bits of data, comparing the data, and then starting to build meaning, interpretation, and then reporting outcomes. So that's her 5-stage framework for analysis. We're really today just going to look at the assembly, putting together, organising, and a bit of coding. With maybe a little bit of interpretation, but mostly those first 2 stages is what I'm going to talk about mostly today. So I hope that's okay. All right. Okay, so let's go on to think a bit about organising data, more quantitative data, and data from questionnaires in particular. So who was it that said that they had 200? Emil, I think. Yeah, Emil had 200 questionnaires from 200 students. So you, Emil, have got a lot of quantitative data to deal with. Have you moved forward at all in organising that? Have you started doing something with that? Do you want to write in the chat if you have done anything? Yeah, no. Maybe not yet. Okay. Okay. Well, one of the ways that we often work with quantitative data is in putting it into tables, isn't it? So that we take that out of the questionnaire, we might produce a table a bit like this, mightn't we? So this is a table of data that comes from Smith and Robledo's book, and I don't know, I think you may have been looking at this book and using this book. So this is data from a research question around how well students engage with listening tasks. You know, what do they feel about listening lessons where they're doing listening lessons? And again, that might be something that you're looking at in your own research. So this was a questionnaire that was used with a group of students to see what they thought about their listening lessons. And as you can see, 3 of the questions from the questionnaire there. What do you think about the audio topics? Which activities do you like the best? And how clear are the teacher's instructions? And then this person has used a table to put that information together. So what I'd like you to do now is have a look at that slide and the data on the table and tell me in the chat, what do you think are the more interesting numbers there? You can just write the number into the chat, but if you were going to start looking at this further, what would be the bits of data that you'd be pulling out of that table? Just write some numbers in the chat that you think you would like to concentrate on a bit more. Oh, that's okay. Thanks, Emil. Collected data to research students' low performance causes and find. That's a very good research question. I think a really useful thing to research. Okay. Right. So looking at the table on the slide, have you got any thoughts about which questions you might, which numbers you might look at? You know, if you were going to write an analysis of it, what would be the thing that you would pull out? 10. So on the last line here. That is it clear? Is it clear enough? Just 10. Okay. Any other people? Any other numbers that you would choose to focus on? The 0. Yeah, Marwa. Yeah. So that 0, not clear at all. That's interesting, is it not? No one said that the instructions were not clear at all. And Ipol said 27. Okay, the films. Yeah, it's 27 people interested in the films. What about, would you on that line, you've got 27 people interested in films, 1 person interested in the course book, and 48 people interested in songs. Would you look at those at all? I might look at those. Okay. Well, okay, I'm gonna say that I'm gonna show you the things that I was thinking we might I would focus on in looking at that. So in the first line here, what do you think about the audio topics? Then I would be looking at here the 28, so the one that's got the highest number of responses. Oh, sorry, Nicole. I've just seen your thing in the chat. Okay, so the question was, what would you pick out from that table? What would you pick out as the thing to focus on? So these are the things that I think I would focus on. So I would focus on the biggest number. So what's the biggest number? So in this first question, it's the 28. You would see audio topics are interesting. In the second line, it's the 48. And that's a big, that's a very big number, I think, for this data set, isn't it? It's the biggest number there. What activities do you like best? 48 people liking songs. And I'd contrast that, and that's a very interesting contrast, I think, with the one person who said they like the activities from the course book. And then, yes, and I think I agree that the 27 people who like films, to me, I think the most interesting piece of data on this line is the number one, that only one person was interested in the activities from the course book. And then on the last line, how clear are the teacher's instructions? 35 people are happy with the teacher's instructions, aren't they? That's very clear. 31 clear. So I think together, the teacher's instructions are okay, aren't they? We'd be saying from this. Only 10 people clear enough, but nobody, and I think you're right, whoever person, Marwa, who said 0, no one felt that they weren't clear at all. So you could, you'd be looking at those. My next question is, how easy is it to see those differences across on each line using this way, a table to show the data? Is there another way that we might use, present this data that it would be easier to see the comparisons between them? So I'm going to show you another slide and another way of organising it and see what you think. So this is now that data from the first line put into a bar chart. Yeah, so it's the same data, but it's in a bar chart. And I think you can see here that it's easier to make that comparison between the different categories. We can see that very interesting are very similar. They're not interesting enough, not interesting at all, are much lower. And that is a more visual way of representing that data. It allows the reader, the viewer of the data to see the kind of the difference between them much more easily than just having the number in a table. So I would really kind of recommend that where you've got questionnaire data, you could start, usually when you start off analysing it, you're starting off analysing it, putting it into tables. But if you move on to putting it into charts, that makes it easier to see the relationships between different pieces of data. Yeah. Similarly, I think I'm gonna, somebody got there. Oh, Nicole, sorry, did you want to ask a question? I can see your hands up there.
It is okay. You answered my question a while ago. The hand.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it was a while ago. Yeah, I'm kind of looking at.
Can you bring down your hand then, Nicole? It's a legacy hand.
A legacy hand. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. That's all right. I was looking at the chat, but I'm not looking at the participants thing very much. So looking at other ways, another kind of way of organizing the data is pie chart data, and I think you will have come across these as well. That's quite a nice way of showing that data. If we go back to here, the table between which activities do you like best, the songs, activities from the course book and films. If you compare that on a table with this on a pie chart, then you could really easily see that one person as a sliver of green enables you to see that relationship with the whole. And the songs, are really, really big, aren't they? And the other thing to note here is moving it from numbers, 48, 1, 27, to percentages. So 63% of that group like songs. That kind of gives it more weight, doesn't it? That makes it more impactful rather than just saying so many people out of the total liked it. 63% liked it, liked songs the best, 36% liked films the best, and only 1% liked the course book. So again, that gives you another way of looking at the quantitative data and makes it more powerful. I think with all data, what you're trying to do is get it to tell a story for you. So this enables you to tell that story in the best way. Yeah, I put on the slide there, be careful of the colours with that. Again, just using colours which will allow there to be contrast between the different blocks. So you get that. That the contrast between the data set bits of data really, and they don't kind of merge into one. That's why I've put be careful of the colours there. So yeah, thinking about how you can best represent your data and organise your data to see what's happening, see what's going on. Think about bar charts, pie charts, spider diagrams. Sometimes, there's a whole range of things that you can use to best explore the data and think about how you can present it. So there are lots of ways you can use it. I mean, you can use Excel. I don't know if people have used SurveyMonkey. Let me just write that in the chat. So SurveyMonkey is a way of collecting data. So it's a way that you can use it to make a questionnaire, but it also brings all the data for you, and it can produce charts like that for you. Yeah, are people using any of those tools at the moment? Yeah, Google Forms too. That's really nice. Have you used Google Forms, Marwa? Yeah, to do that. Yeah, good. And have you started to use bar charts, those kind of charts in working with your data yet? Yeah. And what is it? Is it starting to show you anything interesting? It looks good. Yeah. Can you see any any themes, ideas, any patterns in the data yet?
Yeah. Can I share using the mic?
Yes, please. Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, hello everyone.
Hi.
Yeah, it's really interesting, specifically when you investigate a topic like reading, and how it is really underestimated skill for a lot of students of different groups of different interests. So for example, if you're talking about ability to read quickly, ability to scan, to skim, and the ability to master lots of skills, so you're going to find really great gaps. So of course, when we're talking about charts, it's really clear, like you're going to find 0 opposite 2,
right.
like,
yeah
maybe 10 or 5 on a scale. Also, when we're talking about the habit of reading every day, the habit of talking about books, attending reading clubs. So actually, I found, that's really interesting to use Google Forms, specifically when you turn data results into charts. So it was really clear.
That's great.
And
so
it's free. Like, for example,
it's good. It's good.
Like Monkey Survey, you have I think up to 10 questions for free.
Yeah.
But of course, if you have a survey with like 20 questions, I think it's not possible to use it for free. So I think that Google Forms are working really good.
Yeah, Google Forms is and it does produce some nice things actually. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Anybody else use Google Forms or anything else? Feel free to put your mic on if you can. Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to move on a little bit and think about qualitative data. So, you know, as we said earlier, lots of things that can be qualitative data. So I think, you know, interviews, which you might have transcribed. I don't know how people are doing transcription now. There are clever ways of transcribing interview data, you know, straight into documents now. I think you can kind of just get the automatically transcribed. If you record things in a Zoom meeting or in Teams, if you use Teams, then it kind of does the transcription for you, which is a big massive change. But I was doing my PhD, I had to transcribe all of my data, it was, you know, recorded interviews, and it took hours and hours and hours and hours, and now it's much easier to do that. How are people dealing with their interview data that they've got? Are you using automatic transcription?
Like if I have to,
yeah,
like it depends on what kind of response we're getting from participants. Like
yeah.
Sometimes you find it a little difficult when it comes to inaccuracy in articulation, or sometimes when some words are mispronounced. And by the way, I think in this case, maybe we can use bilingual questions. Like, for example, if the first language is Arabic, maybe we can translate the question into students' native language. So
yeah, I think
this
so.
is
I
going
mean,
to make it easier to be understood.
Yeah. Do you do your interviews in Arabic or in English?
If I have to, basically in English. Right. But when I find it a little bit difficult, or when I feel that like the participant does not understand the question, I translated the question into Arabic in order to make sure that I'm collecting data really well. And in some cases, I had participants write their response.
Right.
Because, you know, I noticed, like, you know, some students are unable to express themselves in words as much as in writing. So when they write, they feel more free to express their ideas. Sometimes if they feel shy, they feel embarrassed, they feel like, you know, they're going to be judged based on their level, specifically when we have interviews in groups, like a group of 4 or 5, or maybe, you know, interviewing the participant individually, just to make sure that we're getting accurate information.
Yes, and that's really interesting, Marwa. Thanks for saying that. I think that's really a good thing to raise about how people feel about talking about things, you know, in English, not a first language, with other people there, and just thinking about the kind of quality of the data that you get from different ways of collecting it, you know, bearing all those things in mind. So I think those are really important points to think about. Yeah, it's really, really good. Yeah, and certainly the English, using English or using other languages, again, you know, much more now you'll see in people writing about research, 2 languages together. So you might have English and then a translation, or the other way around, you know, original language and then the English translation, so that that multilingual aspect of the work is kept there, rather than translating everything into English, depending on how you've done it. But that's really interesting. Thank you, Marwa. So lots of different ways that you can have qualitative data, interview data, kind of notes that you've written, other people have written, and, you know, surveys, forms, those kind of things. You may have stuff which is, you know, becomes numbers, you know, strongly agree, strongly disagree, those kind of responses. But you might also have some more open-ended items where people just write an answer for you, sort of like what you've asked people to do, Marwa, in your example there, and how you're bringing those together. You might have reflections. So there, you know, there are all those different things. I'm just going to look at kind of open-ended questions from surveys then. So again, this came from a piece of work that research that someone did as a part of a kind of action research project. Again, this was about speaking. How do people feel about speaking in class? And the end of a survey, this more open-ended question. And here are some of the answers that the person got from this. So from their survey, they got these kind of answers. I think, yeah, thinking about how we might move on from that to start to find themes or start to find ideas, organizing it a bit more. So thinking about how we might organize it, I would be looking for the key words in those answers. I mean, if you look at that, what would you say are the what are the key words you see here? You know, what would you pull out of that as key words? If you can write some of what you think the key words are in the chat. Feel anxious, yeah, anxious is, yeah, key, isn't it? Thanks, Marwa. Knowledge, relaxed, yeah, information, knowledge, nice. Yeah, I think, yeah, so I think we can see, yeah, I think if I would think about those, yeah, certainly information, relaxed, comfortable, anxious, I think about knowledge, something about friends, and then another anxious. Yeah, so, you know, from those responses already, when you've got those kind of scattered, you know, 6, 7, if you're doing it with 200, if you're doing it with 200, you're going to have 200, potentially 200 answers to that kind of a question. Starting off by finding, okay, what's the key thing, what's the key word in this statement, in this sentence is a good place to start. And then starting to put them together, to bring them together. So we've got all those separately. We might start bringing them together and sort of looking for themes across the whole, you know, the whole data set. So there's an information one and a knowledge one. So I think I'd put those together. If I have information about the topic, it's easier. If I have knowledge about the topic, I feel less nervous. Let's move on to, if we could put them together like this. So the information, the knowledge one, I would put together. Talking with friends, I feel more comfortable. I'm relaxed when speaking with friends. So that the notion of the idea of, you know, being more relaxed, less anxious when you're with people that you know, and the anxiety. I'm anxious when giving a presentation in class. I feel anxious when speaking to friends because I don't want to make a mistake. So we could put those. So we could put those together. So what themes would that be then? So we've got those things sort of grouped together, and then we need to start thinking about what we I'm going to say a theme, but some people talk about this as codes as well. So how do we code? How might we code
and
those
sometimes
things?
it's called pattern also.
Yeah. So a theme, a pattern, yeah, a code, all of those things. Yes. Any idea what would you put as a theme or a code or a pattern on those?
I don't know, like I've been thinking about categorizing, like for example, if we're talking about feelings on one hand as something a little bit untangible, something a little bit difficult to see clearly. And on the other hand, if we're talking about knowledge, so this is something that we can perceive, we can measure, we can, you know, have some kind of rubrics for finding out more. So I don't know, this is how I feel, like if we're talking about feelings represented in anxiety, represented in feeling comfortable or uncomfortable being in a specific place. And on the other hand, informational knowledge. Like, for example, if we're talking about presentation, in my mind, I think, like, you know, we have two axes to talk about, having the information to present to the audience. And on the other hand, maybe I have the information, but I don't have the courage, I don't have the gut, I don't have, you know, the kind of relaxation that helps me present this idea clearly. So even if I have tons of knowledge, it means nothing.
Yeah, right.
But on the other hand, sometimes you find people who are really confident, even if they don't have much content, but they are presentable and they can, you know, get through with the audience really well. So
yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely. Yeah. So I think that I think you've taken what I've got on the screen there and you've gone beyond it as well a bit. I think Marwa, I've been thinking about how people react to speaking tasks. Yeah, that's really nice. I mean, these are the things which, well, I've kind of put on them, but also they came out of this piece of research. So as you said, Marwa, sort of thinking about the content, you know, what's my relationship with the content, that anxiety aspect, the bottom one. So the feelings of anxiety around public speaking in another language, that's a big area of anxiety for people, isn't it? And then the thing about who am I talking to, how does that make me feel?
Yeah, the audience.
The audience, yeah. So those are the things that I've kind of put on it. If we go to what was in the research paper, so when the research paper was published, you can see this comes from a comes from a publication in a book. They've got the same, they've put those things together, the same things together, but they've got a slightly fancier, I could say, a slightly more academic way of talking about that. So they've got content familiarity. So what helps people do speaking in class? If they've got content familiarity, if they know about the content, then that's one thing that helps. Interlocutor familiarity. So again, how well do you know the people? Who are you talking to? Who's your audience? Yeah, and then this anxiety theme as well. So that's you can see a kind of move from if we go back, a move from here's some ideas we kind of grouped together. Here's some labels that we're starting to put on them, and then finally here's a kind of more academic way of thinking about that theme. So we say, what is that about? So I think the process of going through that kind of coding is, if we go right back to the beginning, starting with the keywords, grouping those keywords and ideas together, starting to think about, is there a pattern here? When we found the pattern, finding a way of labeling that pattern or coding that pattern. And then finally, I think there might be a bit more work between them, get to the point where you've got these ways of presenting it as the final thing. And you get some things that don't fit. So we've got this one at the bottom. I feel bored when talking about lesson things. It's kind of an outlier. It's one of those things where that hasn't fitted in my themes that I've got so far. So you might, as part of your analysis, be thinking, well, what does this tell me about how people feel about speaking in class? So that's a way of doing that. I'm just looking at the time, and I'm aware that we haven't got much time left. I'm going to just do this piece of looking at a bigger piece of text. So this is an example of looking at a longer piece of qualitative data and sort of trying to find themes in a longer piece of data. And this came from something I asked from a previous cohort of researchers, teacher researchers, to write about the idea of the best teacher I ever had. So I'd asked, can you write me a couple of paragraphs about the best teacher you ever had? And this was my mentee Musa who did this. So you can see that's a much longer, much more complex piece of data than just a one-line response on a form. I'll give you a little bit of time to just look at that. And I'm going to move on to say, so I looked at that and then looked for kind of, again, those keywords, those data chunks. So here I've got kind of inspired, superheroes, charismatic, kind, excited, and used to say, the teaching is my job, but school is not my office, it's my home with sons, my daughters, my friends. And people still think about. I still think about him. If I'm a teacher today, it's partly due to him. He passed away years ago, but I still have thought to him. So those are the things that I took out of that as sort of key aspects of when people talk about their best teachers. They are some of the things that they talk about, and started putting them into, again, kind of code words. So inspiring, superhero was a word that really jumped out for me. So that kind of superhero there. Charismatic, kind, exciting, and then moved on again to putting those idea groups together. So what are the things that are important? Why are they important? And what are they telling you about best teachers? Really great teachers. And I've the thinking of school as a home and a family seems to be really key for this person, and being inspired and thinking about them. So I've moved on from that to a bigger group of codes for the best teachers are people who do all of these things: inspiring, superheroes, charismatic, kind, exciting. Think of school as a family, inspire other people to become teachers, and are remembered for a long time. Let's move on from that one. So we've got this, and then a quote: teaching is a job, but school is not my office, is a nice powerful set of words for me there. I'm going to I think I'm just looking at the time. I'm not going to look a little bit further through, but I'll share the slides with you so you can have a look later and see this second piece of data about a good teacher. But basically what I did there was pull out more, look for the similar words, things that fit my code list, and started adding those onto my codes. So I got some more codes around caring, using names seem to be being part of a family, being remembered for a long time. There's another example of a piece of data there around that. So I'm starting to build a list of codes, a list of ideas that I want to put with that best teacher ideas. And then, the thing I might do next is look at what people say about best teachers, as opposed to when you just ask them about teachers or to talk about teachers. And that compare and contrast might be a way of moving the analysis forward a bit. Okay. Ways to present things: mind maps, diagrams, pictures, funny pictures like that, kind of linked up ideas with codes in the middle, and then examples coming off is quite a nice way of doing it. And things like word clouds. And if you're using Google Forms or Microsoft Forms, they will do word clouds for you. That's quite a nice way of presenting your data, those kind of qualitative data, but in a visual way. Really nice way of doing that. And other ways to present that data, you can think about posters. So there's a bit of a blurry picture there of posters, but posters, pictures, presentations, or, does your data make a story? And could you tell a story with it? Could you write it as a story? Could you write about your qualitative data from the point of view of a student, a typical student's day or a typical student's experience? Could you write that as a story? Could you write it as a poem? Many people now are using those more creative ways of working with their data and presenting their data, which is really exciting. It takes us away from just a research report to something which is much more engaging. I think you will know about this book. I think Harry will have passed that on to you, and there are other publications that are useful, but all the IATEFL research SIG pages around teachers research and exploratory practice, really useful to have a look at. I'm just going to come to the end of things now to remind you that next session, I haven't put the date there, Harry, I'm really sorry. I think it's the 20, you'll remind me.
I'll just check that.
Yeah, I think it's the 21st, 22nd, coming up soon.
It's the 24th. It's
24th.
Friday 24th.
Friday the 24th. There we are.
Yeah, that would be next week, Friday.
Yeah. So Kenan Dulektash from the University of Stavanger in Norway will continue the theme of thinking about interpretation of findings and how we might move to the next steps in thinking through, you know, what does your data mean for you? So I left on the slide there, you know, I'm sure you're going to say this, you know, be in touch with your mentor, let them know how you're getting on. Wherever you are with your data, sounds like people are very well on with their data, then starting to think about how you might analyze that and present it, start to work with it a bit more, will be a good thing to be doing. I think that's more or less the end of our time, but if you've got any questions, let me know. I could talk about them now. And thank you very much. If you want, yeah, I've got some time. I think we're due to finish at 5. Yeah. If you've got time, I'm happy to stay around for a bit and answer some questions, but I hope that was useful to you.
Thank you very much, Sian. This is very useful, I think.
I hope so.
I was sat here listening and thinking about my mentees and how far they've gone, and I hope that this would really help them. We've got a bit of time. Can I just encourage, if you, Sian, if you stop sharing your slides,
yeah,
I encourage anyone who can to turn on their camera, and if you've got a question, please just ask. It's a small group, so we don't need to hide behind. Just be brave and turn on your cameras. And if you've got a question, please do ask. This is your time.
Was there anything that I talked about, you know, that people are going, oh yeah, I'm at that point? Was there are people at the point of putting things into, you know, turning things into charts, or are you at the point of doing that coding? Or if you've got qualitative data, are you looking for patterns in it? Anything there that you might want to ask about?
Ms. Passe, useful resources. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's good. Thank you, Mipsa.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you, Emil.
Looks like it was
useful.
Really down to earth. This is the simplest I've ever heard about data.
It's hard to judge. It's hard to judge, you know, it's hard to judge when you don't know a group so well to know what they need. So I hope it was useful. I think
this was just the best pitching, I would say.
Right, good. Yeah, because I think you can always move it up.
Yeah.
It's hard to move it down.
Yeah.
I think, maybe. But yeah, I think if people go away and they kind of got an idea, I've got that kind of data to do that kind of thing with, and quantitative data and qualitative data, and some examples of how they might start to work with things, I think that helps. I think the thing to remember about data, working with data and data analysis, is always keep going back to your question. You know, why did you ask them that? What do you want to find out? And sometimes you get a bit lost. You can get lost in the data, you know, particularly if you've got 200 questionnaires and 5 focus groups, you can kind of be going all over the place with it. So just remembering, you know, what's my question? What do I want to find out? What is this telling me about that question? If you keep asking yourself that, then that'll keep you on the right path, I would say.
Absolutely. Well, in the absence of any questions, Sian, I think we are just on time. It's 5 p.m. I just want to thank you again very much. I know how busy you are and how much time is taken to get here. So thank you very much. We're really
I was really pleased to do it, and I am amazingly busy. Horribly busy. Everyone's horribly busy, but it's really nice to do it, and really nice to connect with the group. So that's great. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you very much. And so we come to the end of our third webinar. There's one more coming, and I hope that we would all be back again next week, Friday at this time. Thank you and goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.